Welcome everyone to the first in our series of back to school conversations with our amazing panel. My name is Julie Perkis and I work with Autism Canada, and I'm going to be the moderator this evening. So I will be taking your questions and sharing them with the panel. Before we start, I just have a few housekeeping things to go through. So I'm just going to look at my notes. Before we start, just as I mentioned, this conversation will be recorded. We will put it up on our YouTube channel later, so if you want to go back and take a look at it, it'll be there. Not right away, but or so. And as well, please make sure your microphone is muted. We just don't want any background noise when the speakers are having their conversation. I'd also like to do a land acknowledgement, please. I'd just like to acknowledge the Indigenous peoples of all of the lands that we are on today. While we meet today on a virtual platform, we would like to take a moment to acknowledge the importance of the lands we own. We do this to reaffirm our commitment and responsibility in improving relationships between nations and to improving our understanding of local Indigenous peoples and their cultures. From coast to coast to coast, we acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territory of all the Inuit, Métis, and First Nations people that call this land home. Please join us in a moment of reflection to acknowledge the harms and mistakes of the past and to consider how we are and can, each in our own way, move forward in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. Okay, thank you. Just so everyone knows, we're really lucky to be able to run these free educational sessions because of the kindness of our panel here, but also because of the donations and the generosity of the donors that contributed to the event this evening. So for those of you who did make a donation, thank you so much. We very much appreciate it. And if anyone would like to, after the event, you're welcome to go and make a donation on the Autism Canada website at www.autismcanada.org. Thank you again for those of you who did make a donation. Just before I introduce our panel, just a note that if you have any questions, you can add them in the chat. As I said, I will be monitoring the chat and I will be sharing your questions with the panel. So just to keep things moving, that's the easiest way to do it. So please do add any questions you have as we go along in the chat, and I will make sure that they get addressed. If for some reason we don't get to your question, we will get back to you with a response tomorrow or the next day. Are we having, I'm seeing some things in the chat already. Are we having some issues?
Actually, Julie, I think it might be your microphone, weirdly enough.
Oh, no.
Yeah,
it seems to be okay now, though.
Yeah.
Is it okay now? Maybe because I had my paper over it.
Yeah, it was a little staticky.
Might be
So.
because I had my paper there because I was trying to read everything. So sorry. I will put my paper over here now. I just don't want to forget anything. Okay, so let's get into it. I want to introduce the panel because these are three amazing, amazing people that I love working with and who are so... I'm just gonna let somebody in here, and her so great with respect to this topic. The first person I'm going to introduce is Bruce Petherick. Bruce, well, everyone knows who Bruce is. He can wave. Bruce is an autistic advocate and a member of the Autism Canada Family Services team. Bruce is also a musician, a father to two neurodivergent kids, and an educator. And I highly suggest you check out Bruce's website. It's www.brucepetherick.com. If you're into music, it's amazing, and you will love what you hear. Cara Dymond is here as well. Cara's a late diagnosed autistic advocate. She's the author of The Autism Lens. She's a teacher to autistic children in a large Canadian school board, and she's a teacher instructor at the Ontario Institute for Studies in Education, where she teaches a graduate course in mental health and special education for beginner teachers. She also hosts a great podcast, which everyone should check out. It's called Autistic Tidbits and Tangents, and I will send a link out tomorrow in a follow-up email. And you can learn more about Cara at her website, caradymond.com. And finally, we have Dominique Chabot. Dominique is Autism Canada's Family Services Manager and one of my amazing colleagues. She is a parent to two boys on the autism spectrum and has plentiful experience with navigating the school system for both of her boys. In fact, she was just telling us that she's just in the throes of preparing for back to school, so she'll have lots to contribute this evening. So welcome to the three of you. Thank you so much for being here tonight. You know, we all know that back to school can be a really tough transition after this completely unregulated time of summer, and you know, with no, I know in my house, there's been no sort of schedule, no routine. Everyone's going a bit crazy. So looking forward to talking about how we can sort of get things back to what we need to do to get back to school in September. So at this point, I'm just going to hand it over to the panel. And again, please add your questions in the chat and I will be sure that they get answered. Thank you very much for being here.
Thanks, Jules.
Dominique, I'm so excited to hear about some of the prep you've been doing with your boys.
Right. So we go to the French Catholic School Board. Obviously, my two boys, one who is going to be 17 in a few weeks, and the other one is going to be 10 in a few weeks. And they start on Tuesday. So we actually took a vacation at the end of July. And since we've been back, we were gone for a week. And since we've been back, it's been all about prepping. Now with the two kids, they are on two completely opposite sides of the spectrum. So prepping for one is very different than prepping for the other. So it's a juggling act and it's got to be an all hands on deck kind of environment. So yeah, it's quite tricky.
That's such a good reminder though, that even the recommendations that, you know, Bruce and I make, everything's so individualized, and knowing your child and, you know, that sort of informed trial and error for what prep needs to be done is important.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and I don't know if you want to know some of the, you know, tips and tricks that I have to offer.
Yes, please.
Okay. All right. So a little bit of background. Kalem is my oldest. He is in a specialized program at our local high school. It's a very, very good price. My old high school, they've always had a section or a wing from the school to teach, you know, neurodivergence, and I'm so glad he was able to attend this program. And my youngest, Samuel, who is going into grade 5, it's very, and he's very independent, but struggles with anxiety and fidgets, and he's also ADHD. So he's mainstream, but he gets a lot of support on the side. So knowing ahead of time who your teachers are going to be or who your kids' teachers are going to be is very important. And for Kalem, this is an interesting year for him because his teacher that he's had for the past 3 years is now on mat leave.
Oh, wow.
And and his class has grown. So there are going to be extra educators in the classroom. So I'm one of those parents that I push to get this information before, you know, whether it's like the last week of school, if they know. And they're at a point now where they know, okay, Dominique's going to be asking who's going to be Kalem's teachers just to set him up. So his classroom has always been the same, but the teachers are different. And it's important to know a little bit about them. Like I always ask, you know, what is, you know, the educator's, you know, favorite song and her favorite movie, just so I could share that with my son. So he has that immediate connection, because
I love that.
And it's important because it offers him that stepping stool for that social interaction with the new educator. The routines might change and everything else, but knowing ahead of time what that educator likes kind of gives him that opportunity to have a conversation.
Yes.
So that flowed fairly well. For my youngest, it's a bit more difficult because he is streamlined or mainstream, I should say. And his special educator has always been the same person since he was in kindergarten, and which is fantastic. And I'm so glad that she's not retiring for the next 2 years because he's still there for another 2 years. But it's a very difficult grade. Grade 5 is, you know, it's very academic. It's no longer, you know, learn through play. It's hands-on, it's theoretical, and it requires a lot of concentration. So knowing that his teacher is someone who he knows in a small school of 300 kids, he knows her through a different program that she taught. It was art, and he loves art, and he's very good at art. So that was that connection that I was able to offer him in order to be excited to start with this new teacher. She's now going to be his main teacher. So it's to find out, you know, to take that extra leap and to find out what those outside interests are and be able to incorporate that in your like getting ready routine for when school starts, to give them something to look forward to, but some familiarity. I think it's really important.
Wonderful. I was just thinking as you were speaking too, one thing I think is always important to to tell our autistic children is like, everyone is nervous the first day. Everyone. There's a great book that primary teachers always read called First Day Jitters, and by the end of the book you find out it's actually about the teacher being nervous about going to school. But that's a good read aloud for young ones if this is something that you're concerned about. And
Absolutely.
and when you were talking about the teachers' favorites, I was thinking, how often do teachers do things like what did you do this summer, or what are your favorite things, and tell me about your family. So even having those conversations with kids can get them primed to think about things they'll be asked to do in the first couple of weeks, where it's really getting to know everyone in the class.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel that it's really important to kind of give, because these kids require some structure, and they, changes isn't always easy. And by giving both my kids a little bit of, a little like tidbits of information that would benefit them in maybe lessening some of their anxiety is so important. They know where their lockers are. They know where their classrooms are going to be. That's always something that I focused on as a parent since the get-go was give me a PowerPoint, let me know ahead of time where his class is going to be, the closest washroom, where his desk might be, where his locker is going to be. These are really important tips. And if the teachers are willing to provide this information to you to better help your child transition to the next grade, go for it. There's nothing wrong with asking, and you can actually implement that into the IEP or the EIPRC for the following year as well.
Oh, great idea. Bruce, you took your children on a high school tour recently.
I was just going to say that. So I have a 16-year-old and a 12-year-old, and we've moved provinces. You will hear the seagulls and the ocean in the background. I'm now in Vancouver. And so we're in a completely new province, a completely new system. Everything's different. And when we found out that we got into the school that's nearby, we contacted the principal and said, like, is there any chance for us to meet? And he basically said to us, oh yeah, just come on this day. I'll give you a map. You can just explore the school. And I kind of thought, that's probably not as structured as we wanted. But in fact, he came out, gave the kids their classroom schedule, their subjects, the names of their teachers, and then just handed us a map and said, go for it. So we spent half an hour exploring this brand new school, and both of the kids are over the moon excited. That's just amazing. I actually have to, sorry, as we were talking, I was going, oh, and you have to ask a question, and you ask a question. Dominique, your point about finding out from the teacher what's important to them, I think is a reminder for teachers that this first day of school is not just a one-way process. It's not about the teacher learning about the class, but also should be the class learning about the teacher. So I think that's a really good tip, and an encouragement for especially autistic students who we tend to not have great social skills. Tasking the children with finding out something about their teacher in the first couple of weeks is a really good little structured tip. Get them out of their shell and things.
Especially if you can give the teacher a heads up.
Sorry, yes. Yes.
A note in that first week, but we can talk about that in the next session, what to do that first week.
And my third question, or my second question, Dominique, when you talked about your youngest, and shall say Sammy, just because that's how I know him.
Yes.
When you said they were going to grade 5 and it's different, it's more academic, what have you done to prepare them for this?
Sorry, that's my dog. She's okay. What have I done to prepare him for the academic piece, you mean?
Well, it's more, I know you really well, so I kind of know the answer to this question, but let's share it with our listeners. Like, how have you prepared Sammy for this difference? Because you're quite right. The sort of grade, depending on where you are, grade 1 to 3, grade 1 to 4 is one thing. And then like grade 5 to 8 or 9 is another. And then you got the last 3, which is another. How have you prepared them for this leap? between level 1 and level 2?
And this is such an important question. I'm so glad you asked it, because obviously every student is unique and it's not going to be the same across the board. But for Sammy, who is quite vocal and verbal, and he's very good at expressing his joy when something goes well, when he understands something, but he is not good at communicating when he's struggling with something and he doesn't necessarily understand. And the benefits of having an educator who in French we call it le retrait partiel. So when the teacher feels that Sammy has too much anxiety or needs to exert this energy, she'll summon the educator to come and get him, and then they go run the track, or they do some one-on-one to exert some of that energy so he can come back fully focused. As he gets older, he's realizing that he's different. And because he's in a mainstream class, it's obvious. And so he's refusing to ask for help or for that timeout or for that opportunity to go and exert that energy so he can come back more focused. So really what I'm trying to teach him is communicating. It's all fine and dandy to have that regular educator know what the signs are, but he needs to start verbalizing that. He needs to verbalize if he's not understanding something, or if his sensory overload. He needs to know what his boundaries are so he can communicate his needs. And that is the route to being able to better function in the classroom, better understand what's being taught, and better interact with, whether it's group work or with the teacher. So really what I'm doing to prepare him is learn how to communicate your needs. It's so whether they're good or bad, if you're okay and you understand something, share that with your teacher. But if you're struggling with something, share that with your teacher. And that's what's important to us.
Mm-hmm. And there are so many ways to do that as a bridge towards being able to say it. Because sometimes it can be really hard to say it. You could work with the teacher to have some sort of cueing system with Post-its. So if there's a Post-it in the right-hand corner of the desk, like having some sort of secret code between the two of them,
Yeah. But it's an age where he needs to learn how to better communicate his needs. Otherwise, he won't, and it'll just cause him to fall behind. And how is that beneficial for anybody? Right? So, yeah.
There's also an acknowledgement that actually I've gone through this stage exactly with both my kids, who are kind of like a couple of years older than Sammy, but it also, as they get older, that request for help is more and more difficult as they start to mature and becoming, more and more independent as people. But it's like there is that difference, and we've the way we've approached it for our kids is to acknowledge the difference, which I know, Dominique, you also do. But it's also to be proud of the difference, but also you do need help in this, and this. And to point out that perhaps Jimmy or Jenny needs help in athletics or needs help in a whole bunch of different ways. And everybody needs help. And not to be ashamed of that. But that's a difficult point.
Yeah.
I have lots of thoughts about how teachers could do a better job with that and structuring that environment for that. I've also, I don't know, Bruce, maybe you have some thoughts on this, but I've heard from some of my older students that it's easier come high school because they can email a teacher. It takes off the pressure of the face-to-face ask for help. And so sometimes having other ways of communicating can be really helpful.
Definitely. And unfortunately, though, that removal of the face-to-face makes some things a lot harder as well, because sometimes it's often, perfectly well, it's often, I need help right now, not telling me in 4 or 5 days, or I'm sorry, 4 or 5 hours, oh yes, this is what you need to do to get through this problem. But there are, yes, of course, there are times where it's just easy to ask for the email. Yeah.
We do have a couple of questions in the chat. Do you mind if I interrupt here and send those over?
Yeah.
The first one is from Sarah C. or Sarac. I think it's Sarah C, but it could be Sarac. Sorry if I got that wrong. Hello, my ASD child is entering grade 5 at their elementary school. Next year is middle school. I have zero success in gaining cooperation with their school team, and I'm really hoping this year is different. How do I best set up my child for success in an environment that I feel has never supported them? And I say that as last year their IEP identified modified learning and the teacher kept them on regular work, and my child grew incredibly frustrated and lost all confidence. And I think we have Sarah here. I'm gonna Sarah, I'm gonna unmute you for a second, or you can unmute yourself for a second. Did that address your question?
Yes, I myself am an educator. I'm an education assistant. I have years of working in behavior intervention. I know my daughter's learning style. I know her strengths. I have 100% success with her learning at home. I obviously can't just teach her at home, so she does go to public school. And she's never had a full-time EA. Last year, she had an EA for 3 hours a week. And I mean, it breaks my heart because she's aware she's different. She's aware she's not as smart, doesn't catch on as quick. And I've tried to send the worksheets, the tools. She has a little toolkit for herself, because what I'm doing is raising her to rely on herself to take care of the needs she needs. So she has her little toolkit and she has her calculator, all these tools, all identified in her IEP. And the teacher, actually, I might tear up, the teacher didn't let her use them. And when we were sitting at the IEP meeting at the end of the year, and I was talking about my concerns with what I've noticed and the work level, the teacher actually said, "Oh, I didn't realize she was supposed to be modified." And it's kind of heartbreaking when you've gone 10 months of grade 4 and your child hasn't had any work that is appropriate for them. All of it's too challenging. And so grade 5 is that year where they springboard into middle school.
Mm-hmm.
And so I need those tips and tricks on how to work with a school on best supporting her.
First of all, thank you so much for the work that you do every day. The school systems could not work without people like you. Yeah. It breaks my heart to hear stories like that. But I think it really highlights the need as parents and as students to advocate with teachers and make sure they know what's in that document. It is a legal document. They are supposed to do it. And if they're not doing it, you can be in touch. Like if you have talked to the teacher and it's still not being done, talk to the principal. Yeah. If it's still not being done, ask to have a meeting with the superintendent and all of the relevant people. But I would say probably that first week of school, send a letter from your child or self-advocacy tool. Like I've got a couple on my website that are free that just sort of says how I learn best and different tips about the student's learning style and preferences. And make sure that the teacher is aware of that. Now, the teacher might not be available to meet or to take a phone call, but certainly sending a note or an email with that information in that first week really helps, because they will be taking the next few weeks to get to know, the 25, 30 students in the class. But yeah, when you get that IEP back, obviously you have input as a parent. Make sure that you think all of the suggested accommodations are relevant to your child and that you know what they mean. Perhaps even think about inviting the child, run it by the team, but invite the child to the IEP meeting, like the review, and talk about, you are entitled to these things, and make sure your child knows as well. And so everyone is in the room at that time knowing, okay, in math class, you can use the calculator and you can, in language, your teacher will scribe for you on tests or whatever is on that document. I would say like try and have like a collaborative team meeting. And that's where I would start. Dominique?
I've been in a very similar situation with my oldest. Back in the day when he was quite young and he was in the wrong school, but I ended up getting SEAC involved. And one of the cool things about SEAC, and that's our Special Educational Advisory Committee, You can find them on the government website, Sarah. They basically acted as a mediator between the parent and the team. And I don't know about you, but when it comes to IEPs, and as strong as I am of an advocate in my job and in my role, when I'm hearing that my child is not able to do A, B, C, and D, I just sit there and cry, and I can't communicate as I would, and in a situation like this or from a professional, I just cry because I don't like hearing that my kid can't do something where I know that he's in school so he can learn that he can, and I know he can. So by getting somebody else involved, whether it's your I don't know whether you have a caseworker through developmental services or anything, you can ask for that person to sit in on these, during these IEP meetings and help advocate for you and your child. And then that also puts a little bit of pressure on the team as well, knowing that, you mean business and you want what's best for your child.
If I would strongly recommend that if you think your child is old enough to be part of that meeting, and if not to give input, but this is a way of you asking questions, IEP, asking your child, do you understand what they're talking about? Does that make sense to you? It's cueing the team to making sure that they're communicating not only with just you, but with the child, because I know this is a huge problem with IEPs, IPPs. Also, and from a teaching perspective, I hate saying this, go over the head if you're not happy within the first couple of weeks. And I don't mean, this doesn't mean to get the teacher in trouble, but it may be the teacher is struggling or not quite knowing and they need some support. And teachers, we're sometimes frightened to ask for support, for help too, right?
Definitely.
We're going to talk in depth about IEPs and meetings for IEPs on September 13th. We're going to do a third session just to keep, sort of stick to our topics here. So Sarah, I don't know if you're available to come then as well. And I'm sure you know a lot of about IEPs being a teacher, but we're going to talk very in depth about these things then as well. So hopefully that sort of gives you some ideas to start with. And, you're always welcome to email info@autismcanada.org, and Dominique and Bruce will be your people. So if you have other questions, I just kind of want to keep things moving because we have a limited amount of time. I want to make sure your question's answered, but are you good? Are you good with that? Okay. Thank you. Okay. Because we do have a couple more here. So I'm just going to move on. Sorry. Okay. So the next one is, this question is for Dominique. How do you help your children to prepare for switching from English in the summertime to French during the school year? My son has a very good understanding, but needs prompting to express himself in French.
I think that's a unique situation, and I'd be happy to elaborate offline if you want to email me as well for tips and tricks. But essentially, we're a bilingual family, so we are fluent, and my oldest is more French than English, and my youngest is more English than French. So it's a matter of juggling both languages throughout the household, all throughout the whole course of the summer. My youngest is in a French camp over the summer months, so he's keeping it up that way as well. But we just stay on top of it. It's important for them to be bilingual for so many reasons, but we need to, as parents, we need to maintain it as well. So I speak French at home. My husband speaks English. We're franglais in his household. The dog too, she's bilingual.
So Daniel, feel free to reach out to Dominique directly at info@autismcanada.org.
Yeah.
Okay, here's another one from Andrea. Hello, my little one is going into JK. He has had success with full-time daycare. Is there anything extra that we should be doing at home to help with the transition to school? I know we have a lot to talk about on this topic. And then the other one, I also have a JK who has had success with daycare. Is it practical to expect an IEP in JK? So there's two for you. My dog is going to bark, so I'm going to mute.
Just before we start, can we have somebody from not Ontario explain what a JK is?
Junior kindergarten.
Yeah, I was guessing that.
Okay. So if you have provided the school board already, I'm answering the second question first, and then I will do the previous one. If your child has an identification, you have the paperwork, you've shared it with the school, you will be going through something called the IPRC process in Ontario, which is the Identification, Placement and Review Committee. But all provinces will have something similar to this, where the school board accepts the identification, and after that, once they have been formally identified within the school board as having an exceptionality, they are legally entitled to an IEP, and an IEP has to be developed, and it has to include a transition plan. So if you do those things, okay, I would be proactive then and send it or hand it to the principal, like give it with attention. Once they have this document, it has to be like they might not get the IEP right away. You have to have the IPRC first. So I would email them a request for are you in Ontario? Actually, I should check that first.
Hi there. Yeah, we are in Ontario, and we've been emailing back and forth all summer for a transition plan with no success. So I'm just checking in to sort of see if my expectations are realistic.
They are realistic. So what you need to put in writing is that you are requesting an IPRC, attach the paperwork, because they have to respond to you. I think it's within 2 weeks. If you request an IPRC in writing, they have to respond to you in 2 weeks and give you a meeting within like a specific time frame. So that will probably get the ball rolling.
Thank you.
No problem.
Paper trail is so important, Katrina, and for everyone on this call. It's not to be malicious, it's only so you could refer back to it should something slip through the cracks, because it does happen when you've got teachers dealing with 25 or 30 students in their classroom. Some things could be slipping through the cracks. Just, I don't know about you, but I've got, each of my child have like their own yearly folder, and emails and whatever that comes through for them, I keep it, and every year I file it. It's kind of like your income tax. You keep all your receipts, keep all of your paper trail, just so you can refer to it down the road, because you're probably going to need to.
And if you are finding, this is just a general tip, if you're finding that talking with the principal isn't getting you anywhere, you can email the superintendent. But I wouldn't jump the gun. I would start by trying to have a positive rapport relationship with the principal. But if at that point you still have concerns, then definitely you can go up the chain.
It's also, again, I'm going to defend the school just for a second here. This is the absolute worst period for admin these next couple of weeks.
Yep.
They've all come back from summer holidays. They're all trying to get some things. So be a little patient, but this is the advocate in me going, I will give you this much. But if you don't get back to me in this much, I'm going to go full bore and give me sending emails to everybody. As Kara's pointing out all the time, this is legal stuff, and schools cannot not respond to a request, cannot do the IPRC, cannot, if they have accepted a student with a learning difference, they have to provide an IEP across the country. And so this is we can't let people fall through the cracks on both ends, from the teaching perspective and from the parenting perspective. Yeah, passion.
And we are going to cover transition plans and all that when we do have our future IEP, IPP, and IPRC seminar on what date is it, Julie, again?
The 13th of September.
Okay.
Yeah. Just a couple of comments. Then I really want to get back to that comment, because the question about extra help we should be doing at home with to prepare for the transition is sort of our big topic tonight. So just to note, thanks, Jamie. You usually have your IPRC done within the first month of school. That's great. So I think that's pretty common. That's the experience I've had as well. Marika, you're right. Education degrees don't necessarily prepare teachers for IPPs and kids with complex learning needs. It is tricky, and that's why we have our experts here tonight, so that we can share some of their information with you. So let's just get back quickly to, is there anything extra that we should be doing at home to help with the transition to school? And this is from a parent with a child going into JK, junior kindergarten. But also, I think this is an important topic for all kids, and I'm going to mute myself again.
Since it's JK, I would say reach out to the school, see if you can do a visit before school starts officially. Try and meet the teacher if they're in. They might not be in, that's okay, but at least touring, going into the kindergarten yard where you can role play playing, or what to do if they're by themselves. Teach them things that they will be expected to do on their own at school. So how do they unpack their lunch and tidy up their lunch? You know, and labeling the difference between snack and lunch, because I have had so many students who have eaten it all at snack time and had nothing the rest of the day, and didn't know how to like pace the food, you know, so labels can help. You know, putting together a kit with fidgets that, you know, you can send them in with, but are prepared to lose, because things go missing all the time at schools, you know, they get lost in the playground, but having some sort of comfort item, small comfort item that fits in their pocket. Those would be some of the things I would say. Bruce, I know we've talked a lot about this.
This and I think to emphasize exactly what you've just said, Cara, is like, even if the school says no, you can't come to school, practice the trip. Practice that if the child is going to be walking, or if you're driving, or whatever way, do that. Walk to the school, get the children, and this is for anybody going to any school. Get them used to the environment, what it looks like, what they're going to see on the way. Again, that thing about the snack and lunch, I sniggered a little bit, because it's like, I think from a teaching perspective, I think we are universally terrible at teaching children the difference between snacks and lunch. And when I went to school, we actually had two snack breaks, which confused me. So practice these at home. Practice at home at approximately the time, if you can't do it exactly, that they'll be happening at the school. You know, say at 10:30, you're going to have it's going to be snack time, because this is what's going to happen at school. And at 11:30 or 1 o'clock or whatever time it is, this is time to have lunch, and this is what you should be doing. So it's a setting up of these, what can be actually artificial routines for anybody who's not used to going to a school. Setting up those routines, and also I've got notes like sleep.
Yeah, sleep schedule. Thank you, Marika. Hopefully I said that right as well. Practice, and I need to too, because I've gotten into some very bad sleep habits. So time for me to start transitioning too.
So that's a good week or 2 weeks before school starts. Start getting your routine down. Practice the walk. Get your sleep schedule back on. Great. Okay.
Dominique,
yes, mark your snack.
To be honest, what I'm doing right now, and like, forgive me if I start yawning in the next 30 minutes, and this will kind of segue into self-care for parents. So the last 2 weeks, my youngest, who is really hard to push in the morning, especially he takes medication too, and he's not a big eater first thing in the morning, but we've been getting up at 6:30. We've been getting dressed at 6:45. We've been sitting down to have breakfast at 7. We've taken our medication at 7:15. We've made sure that he helps me pack his lunch and his snacks at 7:30. And by 7:45, we're out the door. And I usually take him, because he's been going to camp. So these past 2 weeks, I've been taking him a little earlier. They open at 5 a.m. So there's it's not a problem for that, but it's to get him into that waking up and let's do this routine. And I think that by doing it, and I need 2 weeks, not just for him, but for me, because I'm getting up with him in the mornings, when school starts. So it's a good routine for myself as well. But this is so important, because with him getting up so early, he's going to bed at a reasonable time. So we're doing that nighttime routine where after, right now he's reading a book. So after supper, usually when he would do his homework, we're reading a book for 30 minutes. We're playing a game, or we're at the kitchen table where he would typically do his homework. So we're getting that back into a routine. So it's just it's really a routine, however you want to set that up, whatever is closest to getting ready for school and getting ready for that nighttime routine. Just try to keep it consistent, make sure it's all hands on deck, that everyone's participating, and that you keep it slow and steady until school starts. And then everyone's going to be back into this regular routine. And this is where mommies and daddies are going to need to rest. Hard, because it's hard. Hence why I'm like so tired and I want to yawn right now, because it was an early morning. But essentially that's, we earn the self-care, and we can talk about that once Julie, I don't know whether Julie wants to add any more questions from the chat.
I do have one, but I do think that self-care is really important. And I really do appreciate the tips on routine, because it's an issue at my house, and 2 weeks tomorrow they start here in Toronto. And I know it's going to be a fight to start getting them up early, because right now I have a 15-year-old who likes to sleep until 1 o'clock every day. So we will be working on that at our house as well. Emily sent a note saying, hello from PEI. Oh, PEI, we love you. Currently, EAs in our public school system do not have to know about autism, and certainly not experience with children with neurodiversity, as per union agreements. As EAs can transfer anytime, you can have many different ones within that first month, etc. Would it be more successful to advocate to the school board or to the unions?
Or to the premier, or to everybody.
I always take the approach of advocating within your school first, especially for your particular child. I don't know that school boards are going to do anything different. I don't know that unions are going to do anything different. But I think if your child has a dedicated EA, invite them to the meeting as well. Like, we often forget to have our paraprofessionals at these case conferences, and we want to also be building their capacity and drawing on their expertise. And they should also be just as informed as the teacher about what your child is entitled to and what your child's learning needs are. So even if that's like, develop a cheat sheet of, these are the strategies that work for my child, give the EA as well as the teacher one of those self-advocacy tools that I described earlier. I think we have to, I hate that it falls to parents and families and children to educate adults, because I think educators should just expect and be ready to welcome all children, expect that we will have them all in our rooms. And we're not there yet. I hope we are someday.
Emily, does that help?
It does. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. They're always at the meetings. And thankfully the school is very receptive and open to how they can assist. And when the principal said it's usually the parents that can advocate the best to a school board, then that's when you know that the principal doesn't even have very much influence in some of these changes that need to be done. And luckily we have a school board trustee election coming up that I think I'm going to be running in, just so I can get in there, because
Wonderful.
they're very open but when I heard that it's a lot of union stuff, I was like, okay, well, how can we get this better? So we're second highest, right, in Canada for autism rates here. So anything we can change for the best can just be a plan for others too, right? So
I think running for trustee is a great way to do it. The trustees do have like a ton of power. They run the school boards essentially. So that would be a good place to be.
But thank you guys. Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks, Emily. That's great. Just quickly, I will look through the questions again, but it looks like we've covered everything. Oh, a visual countdown for school is a great idea. Right, everyone? That's a great idea. Yeah.
Visual supports are great for
Everything.
Snack and lunch. Yes, mark your snacks and your lunch. My dog. Yes, Marika, you're right about the training. Nafissa says, my daughter in Calgary, Alberta was in a special needs class since early intervention, and she's severely delayed with other issues. She took a year off due to COVID and now getting back into school. Turns out we lost all our supports, and she would be in a normal mainstream school sitting in grade 5 with other students. They said they would be providing a full-time EA to sit with her. I'm quite nervous how things are going to pan out. She doesn't sit, listen, or even read or write. Any tips for Nafisa?
I'm going to say we always have to assume competency. I think we can. Your daughter, just looking in the email, yes. Your daughter's had a rough last couple of years. All students have had a ridiculously rough last couple of years because of COVID. Teachers have had a rough couple of years. This is going to be our first time of coming back with no restrictions completely. There's going to be a whole bunch of kids. We said last year that a whole bunch of kids would be turning up for the first time. Actually, I think this year is going to be a bigger number of kids coming back with no restrictions. It's going to be difficult for everyone.
Good point.
And I think it's just, you have to be as supportive as possible of your child. You have to be as supportive as possible of the school and with the EA. Make sure they're informed of everything that you can tell them, because I sincerely hope your child is going to shine and is going to, with the supports, going to shine in school and learn all those things that they are required to learn. They want to learn. My apologies, not required. Cara, you know you want to say something.
A bunch of things. So some I was going to say for next week, but I'll briefly say, like, it is going to be exhausting for you and it's going to be exhausting for your child. And make sure at the end of the day, your child has lots of downtime when they come back. It can take a whole month to really get classes in the routine of things. I do think it's really wonderful that your child is going to have an EA because they're very hard to come by. So if your child has a full-time EA, that's a really good starting point. I would talk with the teacher or send a note about, things that your child does do well. Ask, I don't know if your child would be allowed to like walk in the back of the classroom. I really worked with teachers to try and get them to understand that listening doesn't always look the same for every student. So you can maybe think about what listening does look like for your child. Can your child take in a fidget toy? Is there anything that helps your child to listen on the spot? Or does your child respond to things like movement breaks? Reading and writing, I mean, teachers will have more tools for those things, I think, but really talking to them about some of like how the environment can be adjusted for your child. And if your child needs more breaks, which probably they will probably need breaks from the noise of the classroom, from the structure of the classroom. So those would be pieces I would advocate for, and talk with your child about what they think they need if they're able to communicate that with you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Okay, so that, Jamie, great advice on a daily communication book between your support team and yourself. I think that's really helpful. I know I did that with my son. And then, right, listening and communicating to the teacher. That some kids listen different than others. Great point. Thank you. Let's talk a bit about parents and self-care and how we can manage the transition, because it can be really tricky, and it's a tough time for kids and parents. So we need to take care of ourselves to make sure we're taking care of them.
Let me go. Put me in, coach. I've got a lot to offer here. And this, again, is trial and error. You never know as a parent how much you can handle until you're at wit's end. And then, it's trial and error, and you go, you're forever advocating. It's exhausting. But it gets better. It doesn't get easier, but it gets better. And I think that with time, what happens is you get to know your children, you get to know their routines, you get to know the teams that work with your kids, and you have an opportunity to kind of step back and just let things happen. And like Bruce said, assume competency, assume that your kids are going to be okay. and that they that they are probably a little stronger than what we give them credit for, keeping in mind that with the pandemic, isolation, segregation, it's been super, super hard on them, like it's been for us. But this is a time for us, especially this year with everything going back to normal. We are going to need this break because we've been nonstop for the past 3 years. So once this 2-week routine, that the week or 2 weeks prior to school starting, once that routine stops and school has started and you're kind of getting to the swing of things, please take some time as parents for yourself each and every day. And it's hard. I get it. But if it means I walk my oldest every morning, I walk him to school with my dog. And there are mornings where, especially in the fall, where it's nice and crisp, that, I might take an extra 10-15 minutes on my walk back home by myself with my music and my dog. And it's incredible what that extra time will do for me. If you have a chance, if you work full time and you're dropping your kid off in the morning at school, and then you're doing your, try to take, your lunches and your breaks. But if you can on your lunch, do something good for yourself. Just moms can, if there's a Shoppers Drug Mart nearby or Sephora or whatever the case is, go buy yourself something, go treat yourself to something, because you deserve it. You've worked hard. Dads, if you could stick in, if you want to take a sick day at work and do some golfing once the kids are back in school, because you work just as hard as mom has, you deserve it. So don't feel guilty. It's so important and it's so necessary. And if you don't take care of yourself, you're not able to care for those around you, and you got to put yourself first. It's kind of like, and I keep saying this with, I use this example with our clients, is when you're flying who are these, who are they called, the people that work the planes? I can't think.
Flight attendants.
Thank you. They're always telling you to put the mask on first before you put the mask on the others, before you help the person next to you, whether it's a child or a grown-up. You need to take care of yourself first so you can take care of others, and just keep that visual in the back of your mind, because it's really important. That's my 2 cents.
I'm just reading the comments again. Sorry, Bruce. Go ahead. I'll read the comments.
Sorry, Mike. This could be a little. Please take this in a joking spirit, but it's actually quite serious. Our family have moved from another province to the West Coast, and everybody's joking about, oh, you'll be on the beach all the time, and yeah. I literally do live 5 minutes away from the beach, and we have just made it an intention for the family that we are trying to spend 3 or 4 evenings walking the beach. Now, it doesn't happen all the time, but those timeouts, those times of walking on a beach, walking through a forest, trying to getting into nature, are so helpful, not only for the parents, but also for the children. And I think very often when we start talking about self-care, yes, we are talking mainly about parents, but we also have to make sure that the kids are self-caring after their environment, after their time at school. And I know we're going to talk a lot about this next week, actually, what happens in your first week back at school. But this is also something that probably should be started before you get back. And in starting this, again, routine of everybody looking after themselves.
I just want to remind everyone as well that we're all models for our children. So if we take care of ourselves, hopefully our children will realize that they need to do that as well. They're going to model, they're going to do what we model for them. So, if you give yourself a little treat and take care of yourself, hopefully they'll do that for themselves as well. So here's something from Candace. The physical transition is traumatizing. And I get this one because I went through this as well, Candace. The physical transition is traumatizing. Every morning, tears, fear, panic, vocal objections. It breaks my heart every time to see my son in such a state. Any guidance for improving this transition? If he has a good start, we all have a good start.
Cara, you've got some good ideas with this.
Well, I think part of it, first of all, is, prepare yourself for how you're going to deal with, no, I don't want to go. I would maybe start, obviously start talking about it now, talk about the exciting things at school, maybe find out, I don't know if your child is able to verbalize or in some way communicate what their fears are, because that might be a good place to start to address what it is that they are anxious about, so that you can mitigate some of those concerns.
Hi, Kara. It's
Hi.
Kara.
Just
I'm new
unmuted.
to Autism Canada and all of this. So thank you to everybody for having these sessions. I saw it and I see it as a lifeline. My son is very verbal, and I've worked very hard over the last 6 years with him on articulating his feelings and trying to improve, emotional intelligence. You all know it's complex. So when we get down to the fears, a lot of it is, it doesn't need to be school. It could be any kind of activity, a new camp. I've tried taking him to the camps ahead of time, introducing him to people, pairing him up with, a school friend, whatever it might be. But we always get this trigger reaction every time, despite, even though half the time he wants to be there and he knows he's going to have fun. It's almost like he's getting in his own way, like he just has this massive panic reaction, and so that's my biggest fears. How do I bring him back into this routine? He's already working up the fear right now.
I'd start working with him on a little bit of mindfulness every day, like different relaxation tools. Experiment with, there's so many things you can do. You can do body scans, you can do meditation, guided meditations. A lot of kids with big imaginations love guided meditations, where they get to imagine, oh, you're on a magic carpet, and you tell a story and they picture it in their minds and then share the details. And you want to teach these calming tools when they are calm, and practice them when they're calm, so then you can kind of coach them in the moment. This isn't a recommendation for everyone, but sometimes, making a deal that, for the first day, you're just going to go for half a day and I can pick you up at lunch, that can ease them in and take off some of the pressure if you are able to do that. I know not everyone's able to do that. I mean, if there's, you might not know who the teacher is yet, because sometimes they don't even know really until the bitter end of summer. But even connecting with them and seeing if they can send your child an email or a letter or a photo or a picture of the classroom, things like that to help with the transition might also help. But I think starting with, let's talk about what is scary, and let's try and address those things, and let's work on calming down and things that you can do for yourself to make yourself feel better, and lots of breaks.
My son had a teacher in grade 1, and she would let him come in about 10 minutes before all the other kids to color. So he could sit at his desk and draw or color, because he loves drawing. And that would allow him to get into the classroom without all the chaos, sit at his desk and just have a little bit of quiet time before the day started. I would highly recommend something like that. It was really helpful for him. And he was a major school refuser, but that really helped him. So that's.
Oh, and this is more like a personal thing that works for me, but might work for a child, is just talking about, how you were really scared before you went to camp and then you loved it. And this other time you were really scared, but then you loved it. Our feelings are not always a predictor of the future, but in child-friendly language, you want to say, sometimes our anxiety lies to us, and our anxiety is there to protect us from things that are actually dangerous. So what are some things that are actually dangerous? Let's brainstorm a list. And what are things that feel dangerous but actually aren't? Going to school, and breaking it down. And what are some things I can do when I feel that feeling, but it's not dangerous? Well, the different calming strategies, thoughts they can think that help to calm them down.
I'm going to go a slightly different direction, but the same direction, because we're playing good cop, bad cop. Candace, your child's behavior is there's always a reason for it. And unfortunately, that reason might not be helpful, because very often the child doesn't know what the reason is in the moment. So one of these things is to build up this one, acknowledge the feeling before it's happening, or in a safe space. So acknowledge that they are feeling scared about something, or they're feeling fearful about something, or they're getting overwhelmed. Acknowledge it, and then try and work out in that moment, if it's possible, in a safe space, what's going on. Because very often it's the what ifs going on all the head. What if this happens? What if this happens? What if this happens? What if that this happens? Or I don't know what's going to happen, and that's really scary. And look, it happens to me once
You hit the nail on the head with the what ifs. He's the king of what ifs. He goes down that rabbit hole, and he's got such a vivid imagination that you'd swear the apocalypse was coming, but it's getting him out of that mental spin. It's very hard.
And it is really hard. And it's actually probably going to be a little while of work, but if you can start, little steps will help. And Kara's point about, tigers in the jungle are scary, and so therefore we run quickly. Get that, make it a really vivid, this is scary, but there's no tigers in schools. There's actually nothing scary in a school at all. There's nothing that's going to hurt you at school. Make that connection, and then start bringing them closer and closer and closer, so there is a judgment of, this is scary, this is not so scary, this is really scary, this is really not scary.
And start thinking about the things they are looking forward to. Oh, you're looking forward to seeing this person, and so they can visualize that as well. Because if they're spending all their time visualizing all the terrible, fearful, what if situations, we want to sort of redirect the power of their imagination to imagining the good things as well. And if there is a child there that does get along with your child, maybe like talking to the parents there and saying, hopefully we can meet up before school in the playground.
Yeah, we have a safe, so he had a very, very rough time entering JK in Ontario, to say the least. And we ended up putting him into the second year. SK was COVID, so we put him into a private learning pod, and then we started him in a Montessori school. So he's not in the public system. We gave up immediately, which is probably bad, but we figured, let's get him into a smaller classroom with a consistent teacher and a tighter community. And it has been a blessing. He knows who his teacher is. He knows what his classroom looks like. He knows who 50% of his classmates are next year. We even had established a safe friend who would wait for us at the door, and he'd walk in with that friend, because parents weren't allowed to take them into the school, right, because of COVID. So COVID has definitely made it more complicated. Took about 6 months of that last year, and he finally started going in on his own. And I think I had a drink that day. I think I went at 8 in the morning and got myself a big glass of wine to celebrate. But
so you should self-care.
Go get it. I still understand it.
Yeah, but it's at some point he may have to go back to the public system, because money doesn't grow on trees, and everybody's struggling, and it's learning how to deal with that. I call it the chaos factor, which you do get a lot of that in the public school. So I really like the tip about maybe getting him into the classroom before everyone gets in there. That was really good, Julie, because that gives him that quiet space to sort of get grounded and get into the environment. So thank you for that.
That was really helpful.
Actually, especially if you can ask the teacher to give them a task.
Yeah.
Special responsibilities.
Yes.
Or
my son needs to know that his teacher has his back. So, as long as he knows that his teacher is going to be there and is going to not protect him, but he's going into grade 8 now. So it's like they just have to be sort of buddies as well as teachers, because he needs to know that he has that relationship, that confident, comfortable relationship, because he had a lot of bad experiences with teachers when he was younger. So I think that really helped him to have that one-on-one time in the classroom. The teacher didn't always pay attention to him, but he was allowed to be in there and have some time, and that made him feel a bit special too.
No, that's good. Thank you. Thank you all. I just need to move past the dread. For his exact words the night before anything is, I'm dreading tomorrow. And I try to redirect, and I try to point out, like, oh, well, the last time you went to camp, you had such a great time, and you made a friend, and you built a robot. And so the redirecting and trying to get him into a more positive mindset is a big factor. And for those parents that I see that are having their kids go into JK, I remember that first day and I was overwhelmed. And so I can only imagine how my child was feeling. So I think the tips that everybody's given here today are really good ones. So thank you.
It is a
And
lot. Thank you. Thank you.
Candace, sorry, last time, Julie, I promise.
Yeah.
Promise this is my last one.
We could be here all night. I know we could. I'm just trying to keep us on track.
My boss is laughing at me. Candace, always remember that little thing you said to us about he had a buddy and who walked in the school, and after about 6 months he did it by himself. Remember that point. Remember that with the supports and with the time, he got the confidence to do that. Everything's going to be like that too. It will come. But you just may need to remember that moment too. Remember that drink you had.
And you know what? You can always call Bruce because he'll be on our phone number too. So if you need a little reinforcement or encouragement, you can call Dom and Bruce and they'll have your back.
We'll have a glass with you.
Yeah.
Well, I think 9 o'clock Bruce's time puts me in at noon, so that's totally acceptable.
Yeah.
5 o'clock somewhere. It's 5 o'clock somewhere. It's all good.
Jamie's made a great point here. We also use this for my son. Some schools have sensory rooms in their CERT office as well. The kids are always free to go to the sensory room, and there's always either the CERT or an EA in the room to supervise. I think that's a little tricky in the TDSB. I'm not sure that's where I am. I'm not sure if there's a lot of extra, but certainly. We had our secretary at the school was given a box of sensory support. So if kids needed to go and have a quiet space, they could sit with her. I don't know, maybe you provide your administration in your office with some stuff.
And you know, talk with your child about quiet activities they can do when they need as a break, and then let the teacher know, like you're sending in a book or you're sending in some coloring sheets or whatever it is. I think.
And I've found that music therapy helps because he's very sensitive to music. And so when a teacher is willing to play classical music or calming spa music or something in the background, he really tunes into that. So
that definitely let the teacher know that. That's great.
I highly recommend Bruce's website. I know I'm plugging it, but seriously. Okay, I'm going to mute you now, Candace. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, and also yes, kids can have sensory equipment in their classroom. Thank you for that, Jamie. So maybe can you guys talk a little bit about that, about what maybe parents, how they go about sending things to school for their child with respect to sensory stuff?
Dominique?
Sure, I'll go. I'm gonna speak on behalf of a parent's perspective. So I'm taking my professional hat off right now. For every child that has who's coded, so who has a diagnosis and who has an IEP or an IPP or IPRC, there is a certain amount of dollars allocated per student. And how that money is spent, I have no idea. But essentially, when I fight for whether it's fidgets or specialized equipment at school, I say, well, you know, there's an allowance for my kid, and that's how you should, you know, this would benefit him. This is what I would like to see in the classroom, or this is, you know, tools that would help him navigate through whatever it is, whatever navigate through whatever his anxiety is, or help him better learn. So that's I always keep that in my back pocket, because I learned once upon a time that this is true. And well, in Ontario anyways, and I use it a lot. And now the teachers know pretty much that that's my fight, and that's what I'm going to stick to. So they've been very open. And I think what works for me is, you know, I consulted with my OT for both children. And I'd like to think that our suggestions combined are tools that we can recommend for our kids to have at school. So small fidgets, something that they can keep in their pocket, especially for my youngest one, because he's well aware of his anxiety, but he doesn't want to be identified, if you will, within a classroom. So he will have those little spectra. They're like magnets, little like, what are they? They're like little barbarians, but they're magnets, and they come in this little cube, and he's got that. And so his pockets are like, they're so worn out, but he's got his hand in his pocket and he's playing with this fidget. So it's small enough for him to be able to use. Then of course there's, some other equipment that is in the spec ed class when they do pull him out for whatever activity, just to help him with that one-on-one, like the bike, the stationary bike, or the elastic band around a chair to help with all of that. But I think what's important to start off with is ask them what helps them feel better, whether it's a weighted blanket, whether it's a fidget spinner, whether it's some music, to see what works for them. And then don't be afraid to ask the teachers, can we provide this to them? Is this something that the school would be prepared to offer my son on, during class? Or, ask them first if they have this equipment. If they don't, then ask them if there's a budget for it. And if they don't,
that would be principal discretionary funds. Teachers don't get classroom budgets most of the time.
There you go. So essentially, I'm always prepared to, and I have paid out of pocket. I've used my kids' funding for these little things that are ridiculously expensive, but nonetheless, they help them. And that's the key. And that's what we want in the end. We just want them to be able to go through a day and give them the tools that they need to be able to stay focused and happy. So
Would fidgets be part of an IEP?
yes,
You could totally write
Okay,
those in.
so then there's no, so even if you provide them yourself, you can say, my son must be able to chew gum in class, or my son needs to have an opportunity to use his fidget.
Don't say must,
no,
because there's always we always have to make sure we're open to a negotiation, this sort of thing. For instance, universally in Alberta, you're not allowed to wear a hat in school. In Calgary, it's because they think it makes you part of a gang. My son is his body temperature regulation is so bad, he has to wear a toque in summer. And so he has to be allowed to wear a hat in school. And if they said no, it's like, okay, then he needs to have something to keep him warm. If there's a reason for a short period of time he's not wearing a hat, that's kind of okay. For my daughter, part of her IPP was that she was allowed to listen to music during exams. But if it's disturbing another student, she's not allowed to do that. There has to be something else, because there's also recognition it's a shared space. So we need to stand up for our kids. We need to make sure that we've got giving them the tools, but it's also, there has to be a recognition they're in a shared space, and it needs to be, it needs to be shared. It's a community.
Yeah.
And Jamie
Yes.
makes a good point that fidgets have become toys as well. So you do have to be sensitive to that, I think, but also, if a child needs one, they need one. So
I make it very clear in my classroom, this is how it's used when it's a tool versus a toy. And you can teach that at home too. You can pass on the rules to the teacher. What does it look like when it's used as a tool versus as a toy? And obviously, if it's something that is very distracting, then it's time for a conversation about, well, is there a different tool that can be used in place of this? Or when is a good time to use this tool? Some tools are better in a work period. Some tools are better during a lesson where a teacher is talking. So you can kind of map out that, or have the teacher talk with your child about what works for different times. And obviously it has to work for your child first. That's the most important thing.
thank you. I'm just reading through the comments again, but some comments about gum here. Gum is amazing. I like bravery suckers, Candace. That's an awesome idea. When you do something brave, you get a sucker. Fuzzy things. Yes, fuzzy things. We love our fuzzy things. We do have fidgets at Autism Canada. You can check them out on our website if you like. We do have a fidget, or we do have a sensory support kit that we sell actually, but it does have some great items in it for kids and for adults. Okay, I think that covers all of the comments and questions. It's 8:45, so let us, about 10 or so minutes left. Any points we haven't hit on yet? We've talked about self-care. We've talked about sort of getting your routine back in order. We've talked about some of those questions about getting in touch with school. Do you recommend reaching out to teachers in the first week? I know you said maybe not a phone call, but a letter from your child more specifically than from you in the first week?
I think a self-advocacy tool from your child is really effective. It can also go alongside with an email from a parent. But I think when it comes from the child, like it does tug on your heartstrings. And I think that's important. And but some other things you can do in that first week is obviously, like, you want the teacher to understand your child's sensory profile and their needs, how they listen, types of activities that engage them, their strengths, activities that like they find calming, and then certain routine things, like if they're of an age where it's they're expected to copy down the agenda, but they have like fine motor issues, or it just takes them that much longer than everyone else, asking if there's a way a photo can be posted on the Google Classroom, or if your child has a phone, if they can just take a photo instead of writing the agenda. Like, the main thing is they have that information, not that we make it a task, you know? So just thinking through some of the things that might be good to talk with the teacher about, like how often your child can have breaks and what these look like and what's worked for other teachers.
Great. Dom, Bruce, any thoughts on that?
Tara's really good at this.
Yes, she is.
I do have something that, you know, I've been listening to we're reading some of the questions and listening to some of our guests. And one of the things that I need to recommend, and I know that essentially when our kids are young, structure is always so important. And what we forget as parents is, you know, because building a structured environment for our child provides them with a calming, safe, environment where it alleviates any anxiety, or it helps with the anxiety piece and stress. But life is about sabotage. And Candace, you'd mentioned earlier that, you know, your son is a what if. What we can't work on as parents, what is very difficult for us, is to predict the future. And as they get older, we need to sabotage this whole idea of structure, because life is full of chaos and mess. And what's important is that we provide our kids with these tools to navigate through sabotage, to be able to say, okay, well, you know, let's not worry about the what ifs. If it does happen, here's a tool on how to move forward from that. And one of the things that, because I have two very, very, very structured and predictable kids, my oldest especially is very regimented with routine. But what we've done, and it took us a while, but we got it right. What worked best, and this is just mom to moms and dads, we created our own board game. And it was, both kids love board games, but it was our own board game. And the cue cards, when you pick up a cue cards, they're case scenarios. And by playing this, they get bonus points if they provide you with the right kind of answer on how to navigate a specific situation. So this game has lasted us for 9 years now. And it's a matter of adding new questions to the game and adding new scenarios and giving them like an ABC choice where they can it's a visual tool, and it's something that they'll enjoy doing, and you're spending time with them and you're teaching them the tools they need to navigate through so many different situations. And I think that by doing that, we are able to teach our kids pretty much anything. We can teach them and work with them to navigate through anything. Sometimes it takes time, but it's such a great tool. And I kind of have to mention that because it's one of the best things that's worked for me and my kids, both kids.
I love teaching with board games and scenarios and what would you do if, but yeah, it's so great.
It's so fun. It's so fun.
That is so cool. What a smart idea.
Yeah. It's all wrinkled up and you know, but it's still there. We still play it, and we have like family game night. And Corey and I, my husband and I, will put questions together, and they're random. And of course, the age gap, there's 7 years between the two. But you know, when my oldest started puberty, this was like such an important part, and we didn't know how to have this conversation with him. So he's like, okay, let's create cue cards and social scenarios that would, teach him how to navigate through some really difficult moments. So this game has lasted us for a long time, and it will continue to last us for a long time. So it's just a recommendation I have for parents out there.
And it's important with that game, which of course is a really good idea, to give the kids agency that they can add their own cue card. If they're struggling with something, this is a good way for them to say, I'm struggling with this, so I'm going to put this into the game. Excuse me, sorry.
I know that social thinking has some board games that are similar, like where it's scenario based for different ages. So you might want to check out the social thinking website if you're not comfortable making your own.
Asa, Dom made her own game, so that's why she made it up herself. So Dom, what does it look like? It looks like cue cards. On one side it's a scenario, and on the other side it's a
so it's just like it's like a snake. It looks like snakes and ladders. And if you go down a ladder or a snake, it's going to be a more difficult question, sometimes a new question. If you're going up, it's going to be a question that they're going to get the answer right. So it empowers them, right? So that it's something they've already achieved, and you're going to ask. And half the time, the questions I'm reading are not the questions I'm asking. I'm just trying to empower them in the game. And it's important because they could win very easily. But at the same time, it's family time together. It's a teaching tool that has really, really worked. And it's a game changer. Yeah.
Cool.
You like that,
game changer. Well, on that note, it is now 8:53, and we are out of time basically for tonight, but we will be meeting again, same time, 7:30 p.m. EST on September the 30th. To talk about
August
30th. Oh my God, August 30th. I'm gonna meant that. To talk about self-advocacy, accommodations, routines, and in my house, the dreaded homework. So please come back. In the meantime, if you have questions, you're welcome to email them. I'm Julie at autismcanada.org. Feel free to send me questions, or you can email info@autismcanada.org, and Bruce and Dom will be there to answer your questions. Kara's website is karadymond.com, and I'm going to send out an email tomorrow with a link to this recording, as well as a bunch of the things we've talked about tonight, so that you can have them all. And I just want to thank our amazing panel. I love doing these sessions with this group because they are so knowledgeable. And the thing I love about it is that, they really get it, and they know how the kids feel, and they know how the parents feel, and they can really put it together and share that information. I truly do think we could talk about it for hours. So thank you all of you for being here.
And thank you, Julie.
I'm just here to let people
know.
So as I said, Dom and Bruce are available. They're our family services team. If you have questions, if you have concerns, if you need support, if someone needs support, please, 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 they can email us, or they can check out our website anytime. And again, thank you for being here, and we hope you'll all be here with us on August 30th.
Next Tuesday.
Yep. Next week.
Thanks
for your great questions too. All right. Good night, everybody.
Thank you.